Dear relationship cynics and relationship romantics, my name is Monice, and you are listening to the Romantic Cynic podcast. Closure. All of us have experienced a breakup at some point or another, and those of you that haven't experienced a breakup are extremely fortunate. That means that you found the love of your life and you are in a healthy relationship, hopefully. But not all of us get the closure that we feel that we deserve after a breakup. And that is the topic I'll be talking about today. So I hope you join me on today's episode where we might mix in some laughter, maybe some tears, romance, and of course, some cynicism. Welcome to episode 25. All of us, at some point or another, have experienced some type of breakup in our lives, whether it be from a childhood crush to a high school sweetheart, to a college boyfriend or girlfriend, or because your marriage ended after 1, 2, 3, 30, 40 years, however long you had been in that relationship with that person. And breaking up is never easy. Yes, there is some relief from the person that probably does the breaking up, but that doesn't make it any less difficult for the person. There's a lot of emotions involved, especially if you've been in a relationship for quite a few years. I know I talk about this relationship a lot, but it's the relationship that I've been in the longest, and that was my 14-year relationship with my now ex-husband. It is said, and it is believed, and it can be true to an extent, that women tend to let go of the relationship well before it ends. And it's not because we're calculated. It's not because we want to break the person's heart or the man's heart. It's because we put in a lot of effort to make the relationship work. And for some men, it seems to always be a shock or a surprise that the marriage or the relationship ended. And my situation with my ex-husband was no different. I remember when I had asked for a divorce, he was just shocked and surprised and just didn't understand why I was ending the relationship. Even though I had made excuses, I made every attempt to stay in the relationship and make it work. And what people don't understand, some people don't understand sometimes, is we tend to, and when I say we, I mean both male and female, we tend to match the other person's relationship. So for example, if I'm putting in 100% effort in a relationship, but my partner is only putting 50% effort in the relationship, guess what's going to happen? Putting in 100% of a relationship day in, day out, it gets exhausting from the other party, especially if it's just one-sided, where you get to a point where you're just exhausted, you're just tired, and all of a sudden you start matching the amount and effort that the other person is putting in. And I got to a point where I was matching his energy. And I've always prided myself that I've always been like high energy, positive person. For a very long time, I had a really good upbringing from my parents, and us kids, we were just always happy, always smiling, always had a fun, jovial household. And so that was what I was used to. And so being in a relationship with someone that kind of had the opposite growing up, I made a lot of excuses for him. But unfortunately, it just got to a point where he would accuse me of being negative all the time. And it's not because I was always negative from the very beginning of the relationship. It's just the fact that I matched his energy throughout the relationship. And so, when he was negative, I became negative. And that's what I fed off of. And it was unfortunate for me because I am not that way. And I got to a point where I was just so upset all the time, and just I felt as if who I was at the beginning of the relationship was really dwindling. Like that part of me, that person who I once was, I felt was, the candle being just burnt out. And I felt like my light within me was just becoming dimmer and dimmer as the years progressed in our relationship. And I just wasn't who I was anymore. I wasn't me. I I missed who I used to be. I missed, the person that always tries to find the positivity in everything. And unfortunately, I was just in a relationship that I couldn't do that because he always found something to be negative about. He always found something to discredit my happiness. And it wasn't because I was a selfish person. It was the simple fact that he was a selfish person. And my whole life, my whole world was supposed to revolve around him. And that's not a healthy relationship. So I would say, for a while before my relationship with him ended, I was really getting to a point where I just didn't care anymore. I was tired all the time, and I hate to say this, but I was a shell of who I once was, and that's how I survived every day. I just became unfeeling and sometimes insensitive and just not who I was anymore. And it's really discouraging, and it's also very depressing when I know the type of person I am and the type of person I want to be in a relationship. Unfortunately, I just couldn't do that with my ex-husband. So I would say, like, a few years prior, I was done. I was completely done in my relationship with him, but I was trying so hard to make it work. And the day I had said that I asked for a divorce, he was just shocked and surprised because he couldn't accept any responsibility of his role in the downfall of our relationship. And he always wanted to say that he was ultimately the bad guy, and that's not altogether true. It's, it takes two people to make a relationship work. It's just we were incompatible people. I remember that he needed some type of closure, and he wanted to know why I was no longer wanting to be in this relationship. He wanted to know what was wrong with him. Here's an absolute head trip. One of the last few times I saw him in person, he demanded that I write a list of everything that was wrong with him, and that was really a terrible thing to ask of me. Like, he wanted me to focus on every single negative and write it down and tell him what was wrong. That is a head trip in itself. And no person should have to put up with that. No person should have to live through that. If you can't figure out and self-reflect on, your own part in a relationship, then that's on you. And no matter what I wrote down on a piece of paper, he just wasn't going to understand because he's going to refute everything I said. Well, needless to say, I didn't do that because it's not fair. I'm not someone to cause that type of emotional hurt to another person. I'm not cruel and mean in any way, but for him to ask something like that was definitely cruel on his part. And so once I left, part of that process is grieving the relationship. And I believe that I started grieving that relationship well before it actually ended. I was preparing myself emotionally and psychologically that my relationship was done and over with, and it was never going to be perfect, which I understand. And I don't expect any relationship to be perfect. I don't expect that because that's not reality. And in my opinion, I don't want a perfect relationship. I want a relationship that I can work towards being the best version of myself. And being with my partner now, he he understands that we match each other's energy and so much more healthier than any relationship I could have anticipated. And going back to the whole closure of a relationship, especially with my marriage, there are some things that I did for myself to help me with closure, because sometimes you're never going to get the closure that you want or expect or anticipate. You have to find your own closure as a person, whether it be you were the person that ended the relationship or the person that didn't want the relationship to end. And so a few things that I know that really helped me was writing. I love to write. And sometimes if you just write your emotions and feelings down, is such a healthier release to your feelings and pain rather than avoid them. Like, not trying to not avoid your feelings can be difficult for some people if they're just not emotionally available. But if you are able to reflect on those emotions and be able to express them in writing, you're just going to have, a part of a closure, of the closure process of the end of a relationship. Trusting, expressing your feelings to your trusted family and friends is another thing that's really critical to do. You want to be able to talk in a safe space and talk to a support group, and maybe even counseling. You never want to keep all those emotions bottled up inside. It's not healthy, and it'll just end up eating away at you. Another thing that I have done, and I know other people have done this too, and this is not just in my previous relationship. This has been other relationships I've been in. I've written angry and very emotional letters with no intention of actually giving them to the person, but it's just to help express those. And then once I did that, once I wrote those down, or wrote my letter, written my letter, excuse me. I would then burn it. And it just helped because it was like you're just getting rid of, kind of helping get rid of the emotions. Another one that I've done in previous relationships, my most, my first two serious relationships, I did this, where I took certain pieces of either jewelry or gifts that I was given by my ex, and I would actually, I remember this one time, I had this necklace from my first boyfriend ever, and that relationship didn't end very well. And so I remember being at home at my parents' house, and I went into the garage. I took a hammer and I just banged this piece of jewelry into like little tiny pieces, and I threw it away. And it made me feel empowered to do that. It made me feel so good because I was just getting rid of my aggression and my anger and the hurt I had felt in that relationship. That's part of like getting rid of anything that reminds you of them, even pictures. If you have pictures that are of happy times in a relationship, you can choose to either keep them or get rid of them. I have a few pictures that I have left only because it was a moment in time where I was happy in that moment, even though the relationship wasn't healthy, wasn't a good relationship. But, some of those little things I do keep because that was a point in my life where that was a version of myself that reminds me I don't want to go back to who I was, back then. And it just helped me grow as a person. And another thing you can do is forgive them if you're able to. You're not accepting any of their horrible or horrendous behavior that they may have had towards you. They have to own that. They have to be responsible of that. You are not to blame for their negative, bad behavior towards you. And so sometimes it takes a lot of heart to forgive that person themselves. And maybe they've done something that's absolutely horrendous to you that you just can't forgive. but that is something they're going to end up holding and taking, and that could reflect other future relationships, and that's not something that you should want to have to deal with. So for me, I was able to forgive because I got to a point in my first relationship where when I thought of them or heard their name, they're like, I felt nothing. And it was such it was an empowering moment to not feel anything, not feel hate or anger or love or any type of emotion. You just didn't feel anything for them. And it's a really good feeling to have, to be able to do that. You know, other things that you can help with closure is go out and meet new people, make new friends, have new experiences, surround yourself with people that you want to surround yourself. Have positive energy people that will put a smile on your face, or will be there for you when you're feeling down. Like, you want to have a really good support group of people when you're going through the closure process. You know, a big thing for me that really helped me, part of the closure process is I started venturing out and doing things that I wanted to do. I set some, interesting goals for myself and things that I've been wanting to accomplish and things I've been wanting to do. And a part of that was my own self journey of going back to school and earning my master's degree. I got to travel. There's one city that I've always wanted to go to for a very long time. And I went out, I set myself out to go out and I got to enjoy, the city of Boston for a few days, because that was like the top city that I wanted to visit. And it was such a great adventure. I went on my own, and you do a lot of self-discovery in those situations. And it's a really good feeling to know that, like, hey, this is something that I've been wanting to, and I have been able to accomplish it on my own. And the last and most important thing that you can absolutely do to help your closure is making sure you put yourself first. You need to understand your needs. You need to understand your wants, and you should be nurturing those for yourself, growing into the person that you've always wanted to be. And once you're able to kind of like do all those little steps, these little baby steps, you're going to find how beautiful of a person you are. You're going to find out how strong you are as an individual. And you're going to be able to have a really strong sense of what you want and what you don't want in a relationship. So I hope you found this week's episode insightful, and I hope that any experiences that you've had in previous relationships, or if you're going through a breakup right now, or you're still trying to figure out how to move on from a relationship, and you're just trying to find some closure. So I hope you took some insights on this episode today. I am actually going to close with a quote. I couldn't find who wrote this quote, but I felt it, and I thought it would be appropriate to end this episode. And the quote is, "Closure comes to us from within. It comes when we accept that letting go and moving forward is more important than remaining stuck in a situation that is no longer us, with a person that is no longer us." Thank you for listening. And as always, yours truly, the Romantic Cynic.